Hello and welcome to the last day of Champ Camp. Today we have a few finalists, all of which are experts on DECA competition, here to tell you about their experiences and some tips to help you prepare for upcoming conferences. So how about we have each panelist introduce yourself. You can say your name, your graduation year, your chapter, and your favorite event. So I'll just go by order on what you appear on my screen. So Aislinn, do you want to go first?
Okay, yeah. So my name's Aislinn. I graduated in 2018. I'm from MLK DECA chapter, so I'm from Gavin's chapter. And my events were SEOR and also SEM for the individuals.
Thank you. Helen, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Helen, and I'm a current senior at Limbrick High School, so class of 2021. And my favorite events are HTR, which I did freshman and sophomore year, and then also MCS roleplay.
Awesome. Okay, Caitlin, do you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Caitlin, and I'm from the Irvington DECA chapter. I graduated last year in 2020, and my favorite events are MTDM and then the new name for the Entrepreneurship Promotion Project.
Awesome. Okay, Adithi, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Aditi. I'm class of 21. I'm currently a senior in high school from Amador Valley, and my favorite events are RFSM for roleplay and then FOR.
Okay, great. So we have a lot of different events here, some roleplay events and written events. So the first question that I'm going to ask everyone is just like any general advice or like what's your best competitive event tip for really any of the events you do? So anything you want to just briefly mention that applies to like general competition based on your experiences and your competitive success.
I can go first. I'd say one tip that I have is regardless of it is like a role play or a written event, to make sure you're thinking of ways in which you can stand out from other people. So it's not necessarily about like how much time you necessarily put into it or how well you wrote it, but really think about what other people aren't doing and how you can definitely have like a competitive advantage over them.
Thank you, Helen. Okay, it looks like a DP is gonna go next.
Yeah, I think it's like really important to stay knowledgeable about your topic. Like even for role plays, I know you don't really have anything to prep beforehand, but there's actually a lot that you can do. Like you can search up industry trends for whatever topic your role play is about. Like for example, RFSM is like restaurant food service management. So you could search up restaurant trends or just industry trends for whatever topic your role play is about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've heard that I think like there are a lot of specific information that mostly applies to individual events since those ones have those tier 3 PIs and they're more like geared towards specific industry. Do you have any like recommendations for any like websites or articles about your event specifically?
I don't have any like specific links, but if you just like search up industry trends and then whatever topic it is that your role play is about, you can find a lot on the internet.
Oh, I'll go next. I think my advice would be to try to talk about something that's like a little bit out of the box, but still kind of related. So I remember since I did like sports, I remember that like I don't remember anything about what the like actual topic was, but I remember talking about how we'd like advertise similarly and like leverage the Hunger Games, like Katniss Everdeen and archery. So I think like kind of bringing in something that's like modern and like kind of pop culture related, if your event allows for it, is like a very good way for the judge to remember you because they may not remember your name or what you look like, but they might remember like, oh, the girl who talked about Katniss Everdeen. And that's like a good way to stand out still.
Yeah, I think that was really great. Like bringing a lot of examples or like relating it to things that you see like around, like just observations or like personal stories if you can't think of like an official industry trend worked a lot, especially since I did marketing. Also make sure to be confident, especially for role play. Even if like you're not very confident in what you're saying or if you think your idea is good or you know your PIs, just make sure to speak with a lot of confidence and a lot of enthusiasm for your ideas because I think it really translates to the judge also being interested in what you're trying to say as well.
Yeah, those are all some very great tips. Yeah, I think a lot of those definitely make a ton of sense and can definitely be very easy to apply. Let's see, I think like what Aislinn mentioned, talking about like specific things, I think one thing that like a lot of people may not think about is that judges are like real people too, and they're just as aware of like real events, pop culture, and news as everyone else. So being able to like say something specific and stand out to them can help you become more memorable, since they do have like a lot of competitors sometimes up to like 30 or even higher. So it's great to stand out and make yourself memorable so that you'll get those points and you'll get to stage. Okay, next question. So um, what would you say are some of your like best or favorite methods for preparing for competitions? So this can apply to I guess like role play events beforehand, not the like 10-minute prep time, but beforehand when you're studying. And then for written events, this means like I guess everything related to writing the event, doing research if it's an OR, basically everything before the actual presentation as states and or districts.
I guess my advice for role plays would be to do a lot of practice ones ahead of times. I through doing a lot of practice ones, you kind of see the same PIs come up over and over again. So I think I remember my partner and I kind of had like a set answer for specific PIs that we would then tailor it to the prompt. So it cut down a lot of the prep time because we didn't have to think of like the answers to a PI since we already had a set outline of how we were going to approach it. And it was just a matter of connecting it to the prompt. And then for written, since we did do like a project management one, I think for those events, it's really important to read the whole entire outline first before you begin the project itself. Because one of the things that I remember we forgot about and we didn't realize was one of the sections was evaluation. And that's something that we could have done a lot better if we had through the whole entire guidelines ahead of time, like set in better ways to evaluate our progress throughout the project. Yeah.
Yeah, those are some great tips. Thanks, Caitlin.
I agree with what Caitlin said. Definitely start early for role plays and plan out exactly what you're going to say for certain PIs. And I think certain instructional areas tend to be overlooked, such as emotional intelligence, but it's good to prepare some specific things, because if everybody's talking about emotional intelligence, it's hard to think of something that's very, very specific and unique for the same sort of concepts. So that's what I like to do, like read up on a lot of current events right before the role play. But I definitely started my written prep before my role play prep, since role play was more of like a remembering current events and remembering acronyms right before the conference, whereas written is more of a process. And then I'd also say make sure you do a lot of practice tests, since many of the questions like repeat and come up over and over again. And testing is really the only thing you can completely control in the process. When you do a role play or a written, the judge is always, they can be biased or there's something that doesn't go well. But if you have a nice written score, testing score, and especially if you rely on that for both role play and written, it can go a long way.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. That makes a lot of sense.
I'll go next. I'm probably just gonna mostly talk about how I prep for written projects. So I worked with the same partner like every time I did it, and we always like kind of had a plan of how we were going to like we kind of knew which parts are best to start first. So like I believe like Caitlin was saying like get to know the outline, and that's what we did too. Like we got to know the outline, kind of figure out like which steps like required the other ones to be done first, and then we'd work like in that order, and we'd always like go back to build off things if that makes sense wherever we saw necessary. And definitely, I think the main thing is make sure, especially when you're doing like a 30-page written report, make sure that you're able to present it like through a PowerPoint and the oral presentation in like a brief and concise manner that the judge can understand. Because they're going to be hearing a lot that day, and you know your project very well. You wrote 30 pages on it, you did all this research on it, but they only have that time, and you need to present it like concisely and only give them the material that matters, so that one, you don't go over time, and two, like they can follow what you did instead of getting lost and confused.
Yeah, thank you, Aislinn. And one small, I guess, update. So Aislinn mentioned 30-page written projects, but I think they changed that 2 years ago. So what she's referring to are the new 20-page ones, like the ORs, project management, and some of the entrepreneurship ones. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out in case anyone watching this was a bit confused by the wording. Okay, Adithi, do you wanna go next?
Yeah, I think the best thing that you could probably do is like, even if you don't know what you're talking about, if you just stay confident when you're talking to the judge, that definitely goes a long way. Because obviously, everyone encounters like performance indicators that they don't know how to describe or like pieces of information that they don't really know how to explain. But as long as you just like make a good first impression, that's gonna take you a long way.
Yeah, thank you, Aditi. Okay, our next question is, how do you like to engage a judge, whether that be through a written presentation or during a role play, since both live presentations. So what are your best ways keeping the judge's attention on you and making sure that they not only remember you, but know that you're tagging those PIs, getting those points, and understand your presentation?
Okay, I'll go first. My main way of, I'll touch on how you said making sure that you're like getting the PIs. Main way I did that is when I prepped, I wrote like keywords of the PI on my paper, and I'd write like all the points that were I was trying to answer that PI with under it. And then when I presented to the judge, I would like say like now I'm going to talk about like blank, and I would basically use the same wording as the PI. That way they knew on the rubric that I was hitting it so that I could make sure I was getting all the points that I thought I should get. And then my other way of trying to just like keep them engaged essentially is trying to talk with like greater inflections, not to a point where it's like obnoxious or like really evident that you're trying, but just so that's like not monotonous or robotic so that they're interested in listening. And I try to like always, if I could think of something and I had like the extra like 2 minutes at the end for a role play, if I could think of some like graphic I could draw to show them or like a diagram to show them or like something like that, I would try to show them that like to the PIs that it made sense with, just so that they were like looking at different things and they were staying engaged and they could like also for coming up with some sort of drawing, something like that.
Yeah, thank you, Aislinn. That's some great advice. I think Caitlin, were you going to go next?
Yeah, I think definitely drawing charts really helps, especially like when it comes to the like plan or like the strategy aspect of it. A lot of times my partner and I remember like I think we would when we like write our notes for what we're gonna say, we would write it in the form of a chart or in the form of a graphic. So that way we both get our notes done and the visual for the judge at the same time. And so pointing at things allows them to look and do something like that. Also, if we had extra time, we'd sometimes just tell stories during our responses as like the examples, and sometimes it to the judge also makes it engage and also sounding enthusiastic. Yeah, inflection really helps. If you find them nodding out, just pretend whatever you're saying next is the most important aspect, and then they'll pay attention because they think it's important.
Yeah, I highly agree with Caitlin about using like when you're prepping, making sure that you also draw charts and you can kind of use the notes as a guideline. So what I did is I usually take two pieces of paper, and then since individual series are 5 PIs, so I would basically fold it in half. And so one paper is like 4 PIs, and then another one is just 1 PI. And then for each one, I would try to draw something. I know a lot of times people think of charts as like supply and demand graphs that can only be used for certain instructional areas or certain role plays. But in terms of like the marketing individual series or the ones that are less technical, you can also make up acronyms on the spot. Or for example, PIs that say like describe the steps for a marketing plan, you can definitely make up an acronym for that and then go through each step as you go along. Or even for things such as customer segmentation, you can segment them on as a table. So I would definitely recommend that for role play. And then another tip that I have is try to really play the character that you are, because I think after the judge has heard so many similar people talking about really technical things, they really want something that's more spicy. So for example, if you're working at a zoo, a sample hook that I usually like to have is, oh, well, I've been working here for 10 years. And when I first joined this job, I was very passionate about how our zoo really prided ourselves on nature conservancy, or things, something like that, that really set the tone for the rest of the role play and explained why I was very passionate about a certain marketing plan. So that's what I have for role play. And then for written, sort of the similar thing. I know people tend to procrastinate on the presentation, but it also is, for example, like 40% of your score, 30% of your score. It is a big deal. So making sure that you print out some handouts beforehand, things such as little booklets or business cards, definitely makes you stand out. And then also making sure you sort of have incorporate some jokes into your presentation, some puns. I used to do that for H2OR. So anything food related or try to engage the judge as you're going along. So you might be like, oh, you might have heard of this night market. Well, we're doing something similar, something like that.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Those are some great tips. I think Aditi is going to talk next.
Yeah, I think to make your presentation unique, you just have to keep grabbing the attention of your judge. And so like you should have enough graphics to last you for the entire presentation. Just so like every time you see them like zoning off or like their attention is going away from what you're saying, you can just like show them another graphic and then that'll just bring their attention back on you instead of whatever else they're thinking about.
Okay, yeah, those are some great responses to the question. Um, so our next question is, so if applicable, what would you say was your biggest mistake in any like DECA competitive event? And how did you recover from it? So this can be pretty much anything, like choosing an event or in a specific role play, maybe you said something wrong or really anything. So if you have a response to this question, whoever wants to go first. If you don't, that's okay as well.
Okay, for me, I think like the biggest mistake I used to make when I first joined DECA was like during my role plays, I would talk super fast to the point where like the judge would not know what I was saying. But I only did that at like the first district competition because then I got the notes back and they were like, you were talking way too fast. And I kind of just picked up on that. And that was like one thing I really had to work to improve over the course of like all the years I was part of DECA. So I guess just like take the feedback that you get from your judge, especially at like the first few competitions that you participate in, because that advice will go a long way.
Mine is more of a small mistake, but still very important. So I forgot a page number on one of my written events because when I ordered it at Staples, I just checked like the first page number and maybe the second page number. And then I just assumed, okay, well, everyone has to have a page number then. And so I didn't check every page. But sometimes what happens is when you do a written event on Word, it will cut out the page number if there is a really large graphic on the bottom. And so yeah, just make sure you check every single one before printing it out. Another thing is I hole punched it wrong when I was at home. And so when we got to ICDC, I had to reprint it and then hole punch it again at the really expensive hotel FedEx. So I would definitely recommend to check how the hole punching also aligns with the actual binder you have to put it in.
Okay, I'll go next. I would say my biggest mistake was when me and my partner did our written project presentation at state and we hadn't timed it and we hadn't prepped it. We kind of just assumed that we could wing it and that we'd probably get like the chance to say everything we wanted to say. And we also wanted them to know our thought process, so we talked a lot. And as a result, we got cut off probably like 3/4 of the way through our presentation. So we didn't even get to the last part of the OR, which is usually the most important part because you're like finishing up explaining your plan and the budget. So we didn't get to talk about any of that. And then we didn't really expect to like do very well, but we did actually end up like moving forward that year. So then we recovered by like actually genuinely practicing and timing ourselves. And we reached out to we had our advisor and like the other adult, like I think like an administrator came with us, and we had them like watch us present, and we literally just presented to them over and over and like had them give us pointers. And it was like our principal who came to with us on the trip because I think it was like some school rule. But basically, like we thought he would be really scary and stuff. But like when we work with him, he's able to give us really good pointers because like he's a principal. He like talks to the whole school a lot. So he was also able to help us like shorten our presentation. So I think like basically what I'm trying to say is like make sure you practice beforehand. Don't ever think you can actually wing it, and also like ask people for help because they're always like very willing to help. And like I was like, I'm sure you have other things to do for your like actual job. But he was like willing to listen to us and give us pointers all day till we finally got it down.
I think one of the mistakes that I made was for MTDM, it's a team decision role play. My partner and I had two different ideas of exactly what our plan was and what our strategy was going into the presentation. So the presentation was a little bit of a mess since we were both explaining two very different things the whole entire time and trying to like recover and like be like, oh, she might say this, but we actually meant this during the whole entire presentation. So it was very organized. It wasn't very organized and it was very confusing for the judge. And so I think from then on, it was very important that like the 5 minutes, we usually set aside like 5 minutes after we read the prompt and we think through ideas to like go through the plan with each other. And then the last 5 minutes of prep time, since it's a 30-minute prep time, we also would reiterate the whole entire plan to each other to make sure that we were 100% on the same page before going to the presentation, because like teamwork is really, really important. And it's very, very important that you're both on the same page of exactly like what the goal of your plan is and what the logistics of your plan is. And then also make sure to trust each other, because like you chose each other as a partner, and whatever they say, like that's what happens, and that's what we're going with during the presentation, because it's really, really bad to like kind of like argue with each other in the middle of the presentation. So yeah, make sure you're on the same page.
Yeah, those are some great tips. I have one to add as well. I know this is kind of rare, but sometimes you may have two judges if you're doing an individual event. Like that happened to me once at WRLC 2 years ago. Just since you may not be accustomed to having more than one judge, make sure to like spread out your eye contact and like who you're talking to and speaking to, because well, if you just like focus on one judge, then the other may feel a bit like left out, or I'm excluded, and it may not reflect as well in your scoring. So just keep a heads out for that if that ever does happen to you. Okay, before we wrap up, I have one last super quick question. So do you have any last bits of like small advice for first year members if they're choosing an event, or just any bits of information that you wish you had known when you were a first year member?
I'd say don't try looking for an event that you might think is easy, because at the end of the day, you're only going to do well in the events that you're truly passionate about. So focus on the events that you really like, and you'll definitely shine in those.
I'd say do a lot of practice and don't underestimate yourself. I know role plays may be really intimidating, and it was definitely really scary for me at first. I didn't want to enter into a role play event, but I think through practice, I learned to really like it and also be very confident, because I think sometimes you go into it without knowing exactly what you say and you think that you're messing up, but in reality, it sounds really good to the judge and you have a lot of important ideas to share. So definitely be confident going into that conference. And as Aditi said earlier, it definitely goes a long way, even if you don't know everything that you're talking about. And then also in terms of writtens, look at previous written plans, because I know a written can be really intimidating, but if you look at what people have done successfully beforehand, you can kind of use that as an outline for your graphics, for your text, and I think that helps a lot.
I think my advice would just be like make sure to prep ahead a lot of times and then have confidence in how much you prep. So during the conference itself, like don't stress out too much, make sure to sleep, and make sure to have fun, because like it is a competition, but it's also a really amazing experience to meet new people and like learn about different things. So yeah, don't be too stressed during the conference. Take it easy, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just like make sure you have a good time. Don't think too hard about it. Sometimes when you overthink, that's like when things actually go downhill. And then just be confident in your responses. And you may not know like as many of the technical details right now because you're a first year and you don't have as much experience. So leverage what you do know, and like once again bring in like personal experiences that maybe relate to the prompt. Like if you're doing something sports related and you know something about that sport, like bring it up, or like something like hotel related. If you have like a hotel experience also that you remember, maybe bring it up. And the judges will like remember that as well, even if you weren't able to hit the technical points as hard. And also like if like it is possible for you and you like want to do this, make sure to reach out to like older members. They're always like super willing to help. And I know like a large part of how I even learned how to do role plays and everything was just by like seeing like an older member in my chapter do like an example one in front of me. And that's kind of how I figured out like the order, the flow, how to hit the points and all of that.
Yeah, those are some really great points. So thank you so much to all our panelists here today. We really appreciate your time coming out to talk with us this holiday season. So yeah, I think that wraps up our panel for today. If anyone watching this has any questions, feel free to reach out on the Instagram or any of our contacts, and hope you enjoyed the video.